Most of the time, there's something you can improve upon. The Theater of Blood has infinite depth to it, and continually pushing your limits makes it one of the most enjoyable raids. Because of the high skill ceiling, advanced Tobbers still make significant mistakes with hundreds of KC. So today we're going to cover some of the biggest mistakes even advanced Tobbers make. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see advanced Tobbers making is either not bringing a blowpipe or simply not using it. The blowpipe is one of the most powerful weapons in Runescape, and its utility in Tobb is no exception. Aside from the obvious, killing the purple crab during Verzik, the blowpipe is very useful during the Nihlakis room. Because of the blowpipe's 2-tick attack speed, it provides non-rangers a great tool to fill downtime without lagging behind their pre-fires. Reducing empty ticks is one of the easiest ways to improve your Nihilo times. During waves 1 through 20, it is vital to keep the room empty of smalls, otherwise waves will be stalled. Almost every pre-cap will have opportunities to blowpipe. Another good time to blowpipe is when the ranger gets multiple big splits. Remember that the ranger is solo in every scale. While they have the most kill potential, helping out when they fall behind will prevent stalls. Failing to keep your inventory organized when switching to the blowpipe reduces the effectiveness of this item. If you lose multiple ticks blowpiping, it defeats its purpose. I like to keep a linear line with my blowpipe, an empty inventory spot, and my claws. That way my staff and shield always go right by each other when switching. Keep in mind you are geared for a specific role. You have the highest kill odds for your style. Overcompensating with the blowpipe may cause the ranger to start attacking with non-optimal gear. Now, the final situation where the blowpipe shines is during the Nihlakis boss. Understanding when you can blowpipe will increase your DPS. At a bare minimum, pre-switching to range after the mage phase will often allow you to sneak a blowpipe shot between your T-bow shots. This is because the Nihilo King switches styles every 10 ticks, which is conveniently 2 scythe swings or 2 T-bow shots. However, 2 Sang attacks only add up to 8 ticks, hence the extra shot. Now, the next mistake I see too often is waiting for yellows. Just like using a blowpipe at Nihilos, we are trying to reduce downtime. Waiting for yellows isn't a bad thing for a beginner team, but because there are ways to negate the downsides of proccing yellows, it should be left for newer or intermediate teams. So why is waiting for yellows a bad idea? It's simple. It's a massive loss of DPS. Even if you can't guarantee Verzik's death before yellows spawn, it's still worth it. Removing 5 to 10% of Verzik's health is still worth proccing yellows. It decreases your average raid time and helps ensure skipping her next special attack, the green ball. Waiting for yellows greatly increases the chance of receiving this. An understandable argument to waiting for yellows is it removes the confusion that sometimes happens with yellows. Somebody steals yours, or you tank a nado and heal Verzik for a significant amount. Luckily, there's a way to completely remove this from happening. Tick eating yellows is extremely useful. It not only prevents confusion, but also allows you to attack Verzik on the first tick, opposed to running the distance from your yellow to her. Because you're advanced, you are already familiar with tick eating, likely at bloat or soda seg. Tick eating yellows is no different. In order to do this consistently, slightly zoom in your camera and right before the projectile reaches you, brew, Guthix rest, or eat a hard food. You are not technically in combat, which means there is no delay to your next attack. Eating a shark has the advantage of not brewing you down for your next hit, as well as healing you 20, which in contrast to the Guthix rest allows you to tank a Verzik auto. The next biggest mistake I see is not skipping reds during P2 of Verzik. Early on, players are taught to lower the red crab's HP and then attack Verzik. The issue with this is all of the damage you deal to these crabs is potentially wasted if you could have instead transferred it to Verzik. Skipping reds is a much more efficient way of completing P2. In order for this to happen, there are a few things you need to do. First and foremost, make sure you don't accidentally heal Maiden. Sometimes this requires you to miss a tick, but it's better to miss a tick than enter reds with Maiden at 37% HP. Secondly, you need to be fully potted for every single attack once Maiden reaches sub 35%. Failure to do this is a recipe for disaster. See what I did there? Unfortunately, skipping reds does have an element of RNG, but it's low when you play optimally. Once reds come out for the first time, simply do 2 scythe hits and get back onto Verzik. Just like 5 ticking at Zarpus, you are going to do your 3rd attack on the cycle where you miss a hit on Verzik. Notice how after I hit the red crab, I'm on the first of the 4 attack cycle. This is indicated by an XP drop immediately after attacking Verzik. Make sure to get the crab's HP low. Do not overkill it unless you are using Death Charge. Now even in a smaller scale like Trio, skipping when Verzik is under 20% HP is very realistic. After phase 1 of Reds, you should attempt to attack Verzik on the first tick possible. In order to do this, only attack the Reds once instead of twice. The visual cue for this is the 5th lightning animation around Verzik. It's more dull than the others. As soon as you see it, click. If you execute this correctly, you can Claw Spec, Claw Scratch, and get 5 Scythe Swings in before the Reds dissipate and heal Verzik. The 4th mistake I see is players bringing in brews instead of hard food. Early in your RuneScape journey, you'll learn that eating hard food delays your next attack, a massive deterrent to efficiency. However, Tobb has convenient moments of downtime to eat hard food without this major downside. Now brews aren't really bad in the Theater of Blood, but they have a few downsides and hard food is simply better. Before Verzik, there's not a single place you need brews. Brews are great when you're taking lots of damage, or fights take a while. Think of Nex. In fact, your starting 99 HP is usually sufficient to get you through each room. Your HP in the Theater of Blood is essentially converted to damage by means of venging at Maiden, Nylos, Sotoseg, and tanking stomps at Bloat. You can only use Venge every 30 seconds, and a couple of sharks is just the right amount of food to tank these Venges off prayer. There's one more big reason why brews are not as good as hard food, but I'll reveal that during the last mistake. So let's quickly talk about eating within the Theater of Blood. I like to bring 1 Super Restore, 1 Guthix Rest, an optional P-Neck, and the rest Anglers. Use Venges at Maiden off prayer unless you are low HP. 0 food is required for this room. After Maiden, you can pre-eat an Angler. This makes tanking Bloat Stomp more safe. Remember, we are using our HP in turn for extra DPS. Tanking the Stomp allows for an extra hit. You can use your Guthix Rest to tick-eat any flies or any remaining stomps. After Bloat is a good time to pre-eat an Angler, especially if you're a melee during Nylos. This will help keep your HP up if you end up taking lots of damage from exploding Nylos. At this chest, I will buy a prayer potion if Maiden went poorly and I ended up using a dose. Otherwise, I am buying as many sharks as possible. Now after the Nyla waves, I like to eat a shark if I am very low HP or if I'm 60 plus. The reason I eat if I'm 60 plus is because it will allow me to tank a Venge off prayer. This is also a great example of why hard food is better. After Nylos, you are often spellbook swapping, pot sharing a range potion, or organizing your inventory. Sipping 3 brew doses into a restore into a super combat takes lots of time. With all of your remaining sharks, you will be using your HP to tank Venges at Sotoseg. It's important to eat without delaying your attacks here. You can eat after a scythe swing close to proccing the mace. You can eat before the mace. You can eat after the mace before your swing. Notice how simple this is compared to brews. The final mistake I see all too common is the dreaded triple brew, super restore, super combat wombo combo. This is a leading culprit for slow Verziks, and there are many ways to circumvent this obstacle. It is entirely possible to not have a single brew down hit throughout the entire raid. But first and foremost, you need to learn the brew super combat combo. This is incredibly useful for Verzik and takes very little skill with a 5-tick weapon such as the scythe. This will be your bread and butter during P3 Verzik. Because you have only used sharks throughout the raid and did not brew down, you should have a 3 or 4 dose super combat left over. This means you have 99 HP plus a full brew to get through P3 Verzik. You should be starting P3 Verzik close to 99 HP. So let's talk about how to get through Verzik without a single brew down hit. P1 is pretty simple. If you are doing any variation of 112 or Hado, then you probably aren't watching this video, but just in case, you can eat sharks or brew before P2 starts. Often during P2, you will be using your last divine sip. This is the first place you can and should do a brew super combat combo. It's nice because it completely negates the 10 lost HP from the divine. P2 is mostly damage free, but in case you take a bad crab or an accidental range hit, try and wait until reds spawn to heal up. Because you have just learned about skipping reds, this means you don't need to attack them potted and can instead sip 2 brew doses, a restore, and a super combat without any negative effects. You can also brew shark here. Alternatively, you can just eat a shark if your HP isn't low. Now that you are in P3, time to brew super combat your remaining doses. I like to do this combo before crabs, especially if your team isn't doing Boak, because this is the most dangerous time of P3. If you are tanking and like me, it requires all of my brain power, and so I will do my brew super combat combos during webs. This can be somewhat tricky, but remember, you have a 1 tick leeway with a scythe. You don't need to be flawless. That does it for me, guys. Make sure you like the video if you found this helpful at all, and let me know if you want a part 2. Peace out.
It's like 6 million ways to die, my nigga, choose one. Doomsday coming, starting.